Ma'am, is Andrew Haywood a male?
I assume so by the name.
Yes, ma'am, I checked this.
Yes, ma'am, he is male. He's a male.
Okay, ma'am. So I also googled it up, and the Wikipedia only says that Andrew Haywood is a political theorist and political, and doesn't say he's a feminist. So it created some kind of a doubt inside my mind that Google is starting to be a male, so he's only showing some other Andrew Haywood and not some our Andrew Haywood. And ma'am, the other thing.
No, but there's the latest thing, the latest name. Who is that? The new baby which has been born, and the
Yes, ma'am. Elon Musk. Elon Musk. I have written it now. I was supposed to tell you all. Just a moment. His name is very interesting.
No, आज तो उसकी explanation भी आई है that what does that name means.
Yes, ma'am. I have written it down.
So certainly, अभी तो हमने कह दिया कि Andrew by the name itself it seems like a male. No, it is a male name. But Ved, if you did not have a Kumari with it, you would not know it's a male or a female.
Yes.
And I don't think it makes a difference whether it's a male who is writing or a female writing, because we did say the other day, na, that men can be feminists.
Yes, ma'am, but so we shouldn't know the gender of our writer if we are,
no, you need not know the sex of the writer. You need to know the gender of the writer.
Okay, ma'am. Also,
remember the difference, na?
Yes, ma'am.
That when we say gender, we are saying that there are certain thinking patterns, behavioral patterns which are developed. So men can also be wanting to do the same thing that women have been thinking about. Men also care. So the men who care, the men who are loving and affectionate, the men who cook, the men who do whatever the women were supposed to do, are feminists.
Yes,
so you're becoming a feminist by making your gold rotis.
Yes, ma'am.
As a starting point.
Yes, ma'am.
The moment you will start loving it, you will become a permanent pakka feminist. अभी तो तुम object कर रहे हो. Women do not have a choice of objecting. उनको तो गोल रोटी बनानी ही है.
Yes, ma'am. They should object. Now I get it. I mean, when they have to,
नहीं, तुम रोटी फिर कहाँ से खाओगे? If everybody start objecting.
मैम वो cumulative होना चाहिए ना सबका, मतलब वो एकदम वही बना रही हैं constantly, कोई या तो mom है या फिर भाभी है.
No, but no, everybody has to make those goal rotis. Now goal नहीं हो तो भी रोटी तो बनानी ही पड़ेगी.
Yes, ma'am.
Somebody has to make it. So yes, women have not been complaining. Men also stop complaining. Then anybody can make it at the home. If men continue to object and women don't, then they will end up doing it. If women also object, you also object, then nobody will make rotis. Then we will all starve. So that's not the right way to go, na? We have to go to the way where everybody can make rotis and nobody will object.
Yes, ma'am.
So important lesson. Jatin is an important lesson for you.
Yes, okay.
You have to stop objecting and you have to now train your other brother also to make rotis.
Ma'am, he never budges. He doesn't even...
No, your father has been making rotis, I know.
Yes, ma'am.
So your brother also needs to learn. It is not only the woman's responsibility because he has a wife, he doesn't have to learn. Because you don't have a wife, therefore you end up making rotis.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I'll ask him to. I'll tell him that I told
you and your father should gang up together to persuade him to do it.
Yes, ma'am. We try, but then he's...
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Anil, ready with the presentation, Anil? Haywood?
Yes, ma'am, sort of. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So tell us. No, the one thing I want to put you to notice, there are many years of publications which are not rightly given in this article. So we had to recheck those dates, but the dates are a little haywire. The information is correct, but the dates of publications of various books, etc., is not necessarily correct. It's okay. Yes. Go ahead, Anil.
Ma'am, the article starts with the origin and development of the feminism.
I again say that those of you who can come on video, please be here. Anil, can you come on video?
Ma'am, I have network issues. It's really poor in here.
Okay.
All right. Ma'am, the article provides us with the origin and development of the feminism. And thereafter it takes us to the politics of the feminism. And the whole conundrum of within the feminism itself, like radical liberal and new feminism. There are many. The whole class. There are classes of feminism within feminism, which are interlinked, and they are and each one have their own views. The article deals with all of them and try to project that which class of feminism has what to say.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since for the origin, it was from the Christine D. Pisan's book of the City of Ladies, published in Italy or in 1405, from where the not the word feminism but the idea of feminism originated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the article, there are waves. The article discusses waves of feminism. The first wave of feminism was started by Mary Wollstonecraft's writing of Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792. It was on the backdrop of the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, during the French Revolution, the women didn't have voting rights. So, according to the feminists of that time, it was considered, or they had a notion that if to bring the women rights on the foreground, if the women are provided voting rights and in the politics, then they would be noticed, and people would listen what they have to say. So the whole focus of their movement or revolution was after the revolution was to grant women the rights of voting. Now, now with the end of the first wave of feminism, the women were granted voting rights, but there's another view that by giving the voting rights to the women, they were kind of silenced down. The whole it is said that the whole notion of the whole point of going after the voting rights, it was misplaced. The woman problem as it was, there's a whole branch of problems that the women were facing. Now it was focused only after voting rights and giving them. It was silenced. The whole revolution was silenced, but there were still problems. The women were silenced for a few, at least decades, but it was again, there was a need for so-called not human, but women condition that was still felt by the women itself. And it was again felt that no, we have not been given our part of share of rights socially, even in family and every aspect of life. So there was again second wave of rights, which was again in 1963, kind of brought to the foreground by Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique, in which she has said that the problem was with the problem which she called as the problem with no name, the frustration and unhappiness many women experience as a result of being confined to their roles of housewife and mother, which has been since thrust upon them by the society. Now, in the second wave, they have been asking for the achievement of political and legal rights, which had not solved the women question itself. Now, the goal of second wave feminism was not merely political emancipation, but women liberation. The political rights were achieved by the first wave, but there were still women confined to their so-called straitjacket roles which they have to fulfill in societal and private life. Now, it was felt that no, there are much to do and women need to be liberated from the whole notion of womanhood. So in second wave, they were after the political emancipation and liberation of the women. Opportunity. Now, there are many themes in which this article discusses from the different perspectives. There are four perspectives which it has categorized. The first is the public and private divide. Second, patriarchy. Third is sex and gender. And the fourth one was equality and difference. So I will be discussing first with the private and public divide. Now, the politics as itself stands has been taken to be understood as activity that takes place within a public sphere. Now, the public sphere can be as normally taken to be as interference, or no, not interference, but interface between the government institution, political parties, pressure groups, and public debates. But there is another aspect of it that which says that not just the political but the family life itself, and radical feminism even goes on to say that even not the political but the private sphere is the political part of feminism. So it's not the political part has to be taken into consideration, but it has to be the whole but the right has to be started or provided from the private sphere. Then only then it can liberate, or further then only the women will be having better rights in political and social life. Now, the definition of what is political is not merely of academic interest. Feminists argued that sexual inequality has been preserved precisely because the sexual division of labor that runs through society has been thought to be a natural rather than political. Now, there are many things said in the article that Eve's it has been taken back from the Adam and Eve story that women were cursed, the so-called Eve curse. And since then, women has been cursed to stay or live within the domination of male. The radical point of view is that personal is the political itself, not the other way around. Whereas there are another aspect that liberal feminists however object to the public-private divide on the ground that it restricts women access to the public sphere, and they have been confined only to the motherhood or being the subject and object of private sphere, looking after the family and husband and the children itself. After that, then comes the patriarchy. Now, patriarchy has been understood to be as for many forms, but literally the term pater in Latin it means father, and in to the bottom line it means supremacy of the father husband within the family, and therefore to the subordination of his wife and his children. And there is another aspect of it which says that not just the family but male shall dominate female, and within the family elder male shall dominate younger. A patriarchy is said to be therefore an hierarchy society characterized by both sexual and generational oppression. It's in patriarchy not just the female but rather even the younger male which are been victim of the patriarchy itself. Further, there is another there is an example which says that 80 million women mainly in Africa are subject to the practice of circumcision. Bride mothers still occur in India, and the persistence of the dowry system ensures that female children are often unwanted and sometimes allowed to die. Now, this whole has been reason to the practice of patriarchy in the family. Now, feminists have many shades of patriarchy, as they say, but liberal, what they have to say is that the face of patriarchy they highlight is therefore the underrepresentation of women in senior position in politics, business, the profession, and the public life. Whereas socialist feminists, they emphasize on the economic aspect of patriarchy. Like in the sense, take example of India, women are not provided property rights in India. That was still, I'm talking about the Hindu female, right? But it was till 2005, they were not granted altogether. But even if we see today, from my context or perspective, the 2005 amendment was a mirage kind of ki laddu de diya, but they still don't have property rights. Looking at the ground reality, patriarchy still persists in economic spheres of the women. There are many instances where even today, women are looked angrily when they ask for property rights in their compulsory property. And looking at the facts, even today in India, 70% of property is agricultural property. And according to the state law, there are saving clause which protects the agricultural property, thus taking thereby the chunk of property rights of women out of the legal law itself. Now, social feminists have another view. They say that providing economic stability and the right to women will liberate them. But the patriarchy practice itself has been so deep rooted in Indian society that the other view of radical say that the whole notion of Indian society or the practice which we follow, it needs a revolution altogether to provide right for the women. Then comes the sex and gender. There is one in sex and gender, it says that gender division in society are natural. Women and men merely fulfill the social roles that nature designated for them. It's not true. There are many views for that. A woman's physical and anatomical makeup thus suits her to a subordinate and domestic role in society. In short, it says that biology is destiny. It's the very male chauvinist kind of view, which if looked upon from different angle, it comes down to itself to be hollow. It's hollow in its reasoning. There is an example in the article which says that men have been encouraged to take physical and outdoor work to participate in sport and conform to a stereotypical masculine physique, which has been again itself made by the male itself. Now there's another view. It starts from the family itself. When we say that male are chauvinist, male are masculine and women are not such masculine, it starts from our family itself. Because in a family, when there's a boy, we expect him and pushes him towards sports and physical activity. Whereas in our society, in our family, if there's a daughter, then we push her towards household chores. That no, you don't go out and play with boys. You need to learn in further future, you will have to handle your household, so better learn this rather than going outside and play sports and other games. But looking at today's generation, there's another view that because muscles are not as though important, because we don't need muscles today to work, as there are machines and microchips and whole another level where you don't need muscular strength to do work or prove your stamina or strength. And looking at the, I just want to give an example that in the Mines Act, till 2019, women were not allowed to work in the mines. For to be precise, coal mines. It was in 2019 last year that government has allowed women, recognizing that women are at par with men, that they were allowed to work at mine even at night, and they can do overwork. So what I'm trying to say is that in today's world, women don't need physical strength or endurance to be taken to prove themselves to be as men. And there's another example in the article that says, in today's modern world, women may be mothers, but they do not accept the responsibility of motherhood, nurturing, education, and raising children by devoting themselves to home and family. The link between child bearing and child rearing, both are different, is cultural. It's not biological that because women gave birth to a child, they will be child rearing and bearing also. Women are expected to stay at home, bring up their children and look after the house because of the structure of traditional family life. In today's modernist view and world, it's not just the duty of the women to bring up the child or do household chores. And
Anil, your voice is breaking. Lost Anil's voice. No, not yet.
then the article talks about sex and gender. And it says that sex refers to the biological difference between male and females. And these differences are natural and therefore are unalterable. It is. But the most important sex differences are those that are linked to reproduction. Whereas gender, on the other hand, is a cultural term. Gender differences are typically imposed through contrasting stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. There's a very interesting line which Simon de Beauvoir, which he says that women are not made. Women are made, rather they are not born itself. It's the whole upbringing and the perspective which the parents look at. So it's from the childhood itself that women are molded. The whole Indian family scenario is structured as such that daughter is molded to be a woman, to be a caregiver. As a mother, they are not born to be just to do all this that which the society has imposed or forced upon them. Further, there's another distinction made in the article which says that all human beings, regardless of sex, possesses the genetic inheritance of mother and the father both. And not just it's the mother which says that. And therefore, they both embody a blend of either female and a male attribute of traits. Now, such a view accepts that sex differences are biological facts of life, but insists that they do not have social, political, or economic significances. Further, from the essentialist perspective, it further says that social and cultural characteristics are seen to reflect deeper biological differences. Such a view differs from conservative anti-feminism in that it takes womanly qualities, quote unquote, to include positive attributes such as capacity for nurturing, cooperation, and intuition, rather than negative ones associated with submission and subordination. Now, when we say that both male and female have both the characteristic, and the so-called human being as taken to be male has to have the attributes of the male only, and female have the only female attributes. But with them, there are both positive sides and negative sides, which are attribute to male and female both. Now, taking sex only to be a clear-cut biological distinction, there's another example in the article which says biologically womanhood do not apply to many, as there are many women who can't bear child, or women who are just a minute. And then women, then for lesbian, they have used the term that sexually not attracted to women, attracted to men. Now, the whole notion of women cannot be attributed to as a stereotype that all the women are same. There are many spectrum itself in the women that is saying ideally the women has to do this and they have to fit all the criteria. But there are women who are biologically women, but they do not fit in the, they do not check the box itself of the which the society has provided them. Then it differentiates on the gender perspectives. In on the perspective of gender, there are many views of liberal, conservative, socialists, and fascists. Liberal says that differences between women and men are being of entirely private or personal significance. In public and political life, all people are considered as individuals, gender being as irrelevant as ethnicity or social class. Individualism is supposed to be gender blind. And then conservatives, they say that the sexual division of labor between men and women is natural and inevitable. Gender is thus one of the factors that give society its organic and hierarchical character. Fascists, on the other hand, say that men naturally monopolizes leadership and decision making, while women are suited to an entirely domestic, supportive, and subordinate roles. And one more that's important is, as Indian society is more into religious, now the religious perspective is that gender is a God-given division, and thus as one that is crucial to social and political organization. Patriarchal structures and the leadership of males therefore tend to be regarded as natural and desirable. So the whole notion of feminism and patriarchy, there are many views, and there's one critique of them later. Then the feminism is distinguished on equality and difference, which says that traditionally women have demanded equality with men, even to the extent that feminism is often characterized as a movement of the achievement of sexual equality. Now, when we say equality, which they tend to seek, now the whole ideal human being, it has been kind of what we say portrayed or idealized by the men itself, that they say this is the ideal being which we all need to aspire for, be like one. So in the background, what women are running after to be and asking for equality is to be like men. And equality and the different principle says that you don't need to be like men. Be your own individual and be comfortable in your own space, rather than being a man. Own your individuality and be proud of it. Equality, on the other hand, means access to the public realm. Social feminists, in contrast, argue that equal rights may be meaningless unless women enjoy social equality. Different feminism and feminists regard the very notion equality as either misguided or simply undesirable. As I was saying that to want to be equal to a man implies that women are male identified. In that they define their goal in terms of what men are and what men have, rather than demand for equality, thus embodying our desire to be manlike. Whereas liberation itself in this context means the desire to develop and achieve fulfillment as women. In other way, women need to be woman identified rather than male identified. Uh, Again, the next topic which the article discusses is sex and politics. Which says that women are born to be housewives and mother, and rebellion against this fate is both pointless and wrong. At best, conservatives can argue that they support sexual equality on the ground that women's family responsibilities are every bit as important as men's public duties. So they say that men and women are different. Women and women are equal, but they are different. So the society has projected or portrayed men to be to work around in public sphere, whereas women has been asked to work in the private sphere. Now there's another aspect of this public and private sphere which says that, which gives example of like conservative countries like Sudan, Pakistan, where Sharia law is in practice and moral and religious principles have sometimes been portrayed as a means of enhancing the status of women, where the Sharia law, which is very in today's time has been very conservative, which is taken by the women itself or those countries to be enhancing the status of women itself. Like the dress code, exclusion of women from public life have been viewed by some Muslim women itself as symbol of liberation. That they don't need further rights. The Sharia law or the old age dogma and traditions, they are there to protect their right, and by them only they can be liberated. That's another aspect of conversation aspect of conservatism. Now, within all these categories, there are different views which have been categorized into liberal, feminism, socialist, radical, and in today's which we are living in is new feminist traditions. Now, liberal feminism, which says that liberal feminism, which started from the Wollstonecraft's Vindication of Rights article, which started the first wave, argued that women should be entitled to the same rights and privileges as men on the ground that they are human beings. She claimed that the distinction of sex, which become unimportant in political and social life, if women gained access to education and were regarded as rational creatures in their own right. Now, then there was another article by John Stuart Mill, written in collaboration with Harriet Taylor, which proposed that society should be organized according to the principle of reason, and that accidents of birth, which is in context of being born as a male and female, should be irrelevant. Women should be entitled to rights and liberties enjoyed by men, and in particular, the vote of right, which was the whole argument or the revolution by the women to have right to vote. Thereafter, the second wave, which has said that the women mystique, to which the Freedom article, which was previously discussed, which has discussed the cultural myth that women seek security and fulfillment in domestic life and feminine behavior, quote unquote, a myth that deserves to discourage women from entering employment, politics, and public life in general. In that article, she had highlighted what she called the problem with no name, by which she meant that sense of despair and deep unhappiness many women experience because they are confined to a domestic existence, unable to gain fulfillment in a career or through political life. Now, I will come to the conclusion later, what I have to say. I'm sticking to the article itself for now. It further says that if individuals are to be judged, it should be on rational grounds, on the content of the character, their talents, and their personal worth. Liberal feminism in itself is essentially reformist. Reform is necessary, as they argue the reform is that only to ensure the establishment of equal rights in the public sphere. The right to education, the right to vote, and the right to pursue a career, and so on. Far less attention has been given to private sphere. The sexual division and distribution of power within the family has very less talked about. It's the rights given to the child or female in the family which builds a confidence to face and walk her life in the public sphere. Further, radical feminists have drawn attention to the limitation of individualism as the basis of gender politics. An individualistic perspective draws attention away from the structural characters of patriarchy, in which women are subordinated, not as individuals who happen to be denied rights or opportunities, but as a sex that is subject to systematic and pervasive oppression. Then it again says the same thing which I had talked about earlier, that treating people equally may thus mean treating women like men. They don't need to be like men, they need to be women identified itself. Further, the demand for equal rights assume that all women would have the opportunity to take advantage of better educational economic opportunities. In reality, women are judged not only by their talents and abilities, but also by social and economic factors. To add on to that, liberal feminism they reflect that the interest of white middle class women in developed society. The whole notion of this feminism, which say that the educated women need to be empowered and pushed further into the mainstream, but they are ignoring the other women, which is the working class women, which are not in the offices but in the menial jobs like housemaids, or which works in the mine, or menial working class women, and the black women and women in the developing world who are not even aware of the rights which they have, that they can claim and fight for. So the whole revolution, the first and second wave, which was taken and rights were earned, they are only for the women, at least who know that they have these rights. But there's a whole chunk of women who don't even know that these rights exist, and to fight for something, a person need to know that they have something which is theirs. So where the women who don't even know that they have such a right, they are ignorant and still living in deplorable conditions, and the whole paradigm of society and dogma has suppressed them even further. Now, the next topic was socialist feminism. Socialist feminists argue that the relationship between the sexes is rooted in the social and economic structure itself, and that nothing short of profound social change. Even some would say that a revolution can offer women the prospect of genuine emancipation. Now, in the article, a report has been pointed out which is of 1980, and I'm certain that the figures provided have been long back gone and condition must be more deplorable. But what it says is that 50% of the women population, they perform nearly 2/3 of the working hours and receive 1/10 of the world income and 1% less of the world's property. Now, it is only the figures which are in the public sphere. There's whole another argument that what the women does in private life, what is said to be the unpaid labor they do in their private life, like looking after children and household, which according to a study has been accounted for 4 trillion unpaid labor which the woman contributes. It is said that if women ask for their pay, what they do at their home for free as an obligation, the whole paradigm of which the society runs, it will be altogether changed. So the whole idea that women are taken for granted, that it is their job or work imposed, that this is your work and only you need to do for that, and they don't even, all they ask for is respect, and even that is denied to them. So it was very interesting that the unpaid labor which the women that are women do in home is of very profound importance. Further, the central theme of socialist feminism is that patriarchy can only be understood in the light of social and economic factors. Now, the socialists bring down all their argument to the idea of private property, that it was for saving the private property that women were sidelined. In the article, it has provided an example that in pre-capitalist societies, family life has been communistic and there were mother right, wherein the inheritance of property and social position through the female line was widely observed. It was only to save it was after the capitalism came into and to save the private property sphere that women were sidelined. And for sidelining them, the women were compensated for this suppression by the development of the cult of femininity, which says that attraction, which extols or provide them the mirage or the false notion of romantic love, but in reality is an organized hypocrisy designed to protect male privilege and property. Then in further provides an example that even today, it is the women only which are temporary workers are conditioned to accept poorly wages, low status job, which are the advantages of helping to depress wage rates. If there is some person doing the same work in lower wage rate, then the other cannot claim that no, I need more extra wages for the same work. So in a way, they are an excuse to lower the wages without posing a threat to men's job. So there's a distinction provided that if women do the same job for a lower wage pay, and whereas if there was a man doing the same work, then he would be asking for and had to be paid better wages. Further, in bearing and rearing children, women are producing labor forces for the next generation and thus guaranteeing future production. So women in this article, from the perspective of socialism, has been portrayed as cannon fodder, as to say. Further, it says that women are also responsible for socializing, conditioning, and even educating children, and which into results that them into developing into disciplined and obedient workers. So in a way, the whole system has been put into place wherein women has been subjugated, and when the children are born to her, she will make them into her own image to be suppressed and to become obedient and disciplined. And from the perspective of household, it is in the article it is said that in their roles of housewives, women relieve men of the burden of housework and child rearing, allowing them to concentrate their time and energy upon paid and productive employment. In it further does a very radical idea that the whole household work that the women do, it kind of keep in control the men, so they will always be into the cycle of looking after the wife and children, and not go after better things, or he won't be having time to do better things or aspire for better living. So from the capitalist and socialist point of view, women plays a very important role in subordinating the male itself, so that he doesn't kind of look better things or revolutionize or fight for his rights better. Further, there is an example of Soviet Union wherein socialist government has been there, and socialism does not in itself end the patriarchy. It was the idea that if a socialists are present, then women will be provided better rights. But the socialism is in presence practiced. Even there, women are not liberated. They are still in the same position. Further, there's an example of UK socialist feminist Juliet Mitchell, which has categorized the work that women do in 4 categories. They are members of the workforce and are active in production. They bear children and thus reproduce the human species. Third, they are responsible for socializing children. And fourth, she says that women are sex objects. From this perspective, liberation requires that women achieve emancipation in each of the social spheres, and not merely that the capitalist class society is replaced by socialism. Now, the next category of feminism is radical feminism. Now, the radical feminists, they highlight the extent to which the masculine is represented as the positive or the norm, while the feminism or the feminine trait is portrayed as other. Now, such otherness, which the women are projected as, limits women's freedom and prevents them from expressing their full humanity. The central feature of radical feminism is the belief that sexual oppression is the most fundamental feature of society, and that other forms of injustice, class exploitation, racial hatred, and so on are merely secondary. So it says that sexual oppression in itself is the most radical form of injustice done toward the women. Controlling the sexuality of women, they control half the population of the world. Further, the different roles of women and men and women have their origin in the process of which is in the article termed as conditioning. It says that from the very early age, boys and girls are encouraged to conform to a very specific gender identities which has been projected or provided to by the society. This process takes place largely within the family. It starts within the family itself. Patriarchy is chief institution, but it is also evident in literature, art, public sphere, and economy. It says that the whole idea of gender identities which has been provided in the society, where does it comes from? It comes from the patriarchy institution, It's in the literature, as we can, as Mehmet said, that Maryada Purushottam Ram, that the ideal person need to be this. It's in the literature or art, in public life and in economy, that people are aspired to be like one. So the whole image of ideal human being, it itself is projected by male itself, as there's a particular phase for it, that's a male gaze, looking at things or perspective from the male gaze. So the solution for this radical feminist provides that this whole patriarchy should be challenged through a process of consciousness raising, an idea which was influenced or taken by the Black Power movement of the 1960s and early 70s. So it says that women liberation thus requires a revolutionary change. The institution of the family would have to be destroyed, and psychologically and sexually oppression of women that operates at all levels of society would have to be overthrown. It says that radical steps needs to be taken. The change cannot be enthralled in a day or two. So the whole notion of society as it is needs to be overthrown, and new society needs to be drawn up. Now there's many arguments made in the articles. One says that the basic fact that women bear babies has led to a natural division of labor within what she calls the biological family. In bearing child, she says, women are constantly at the mercy of biology, and therefore, like children, are dependent upon men on their physical survival, which she further takes the argument to the curse of Eve, as I had discussed earlier, that God has cursed Eve, and the whole female line is living up to that. Then it again revolves around the article that women should not try to be more like men. Indeed, instead they should recognize and embrace their sisterhood that bond their links them to all other women. But it again implies that in certain respects women are superior, possessing the equalities of creativity, sensitivity, and caring, which men can never fully appreciate or can't even develop or apprehend. Further, the whole rape culture has been kind of explained. There's a writer, Brown Miller, which argues that men rape because they can, because they have the biological capacity to rape, and that even men who do not rape, nevertheless, they too benefit from the fear and anxiety that rape provokes amongst all women. So there are many ways or social dogma through which women has been suppressed altogether. And take as the example of rape was given, even the men who don't, they too derive benefit out of it. The fear and anxiety itself keep the women, as it said, under control. And last not the least, just a minute. Then the last, it has discussed the feminists in the 21st century. Now, in this, it has said that feminism has taken a very long leap forward, and today it is the men who are overshadowed by the feminism and women. But there are still radical practices which was done, example has been given of the president of US like Reagan and Thatcher administration in the 80s. For instance, when openly anti-feminist in their call for the restoration of family values and in their emphasis upon women's traditional role and mother and wife. The new right tried to reassert pro-family patriarchal values and ideas, not only because they are seen to be natural, but also because they are viewed as guarantee of social order and stability. So, in a way, it says that women asking for more rights and liberation has done away with the social order and responsibility, and it is a patriarchy and the old norms and order of the society which will keep the society into order and stability. There's another Susan Faludi which says that everything which the feminists have asking for, like rights and movements and all the family structure have been toppled out. Everything where the problem arises in the society, blame it on the feminism syndrome. It says that blame it on the women, the feminism syndrome. Just one more. In The Whole Women, 1999, Greer attacked the notion that women are having it all, quote unquote, having it all, arguing that they have abandoned the goal of liberation and settled for a phony equality that amounts to assimilation, becoming more like men. This highlights the capacity of patriarchy. Now look at the power of patriarchy, that the whole movement has been worked out, and still it's the power of patriarchy to reproduce itself generation after generation, subordinating women by creating bogus form of emancipation. The whole idea of feminism and the rights provided are bogus form of emancipation. Now, from all the article which I could boil down was that treating people equally may mean that treating women like men. It's not the whole change which, as we have looked into, and feminism has been long back in the society, but the change itself has to come from a family itself. No other person can give you your right. It's you yourself who need to fight for your right, and only when you help yourself that the other people will look after you and at least stand with you. So we don't need other people to change. It's from our itself that the change will come, and we need to change our view or male gaze at its head to change our perspective and bring that change from within ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Anil. I can say that you have gone through the whole article, you have made notes, you have presented it fully. Now I want you to reflect on your presentation. It went on for 1 hour. Do you think you could have done a better presentation within this 1 hour? And which ways? And I'm talking about the andragogy course that we've gone through. What you could have done differently? Make it even better.
Ma'am, I could have prepared a presentation, PPT.
And then why did you not?
Ma'am, to grasp it fully, I had to go through it like 4 times, and PPT needs time to make, and I'm not making any excuses, but I should have done better.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Manya also. It did a tremendous job, but nothing which reflected our andragogy course, which we went through the whole semester. So what do you think? What that course was just a part of PhD coursework, or was it a life skill?
Life skill, ma'am.
Anya?
Yes, ma'am, it was a life skill.
Yeah. So when will that life skill be used?
Ma'am, actually, I thought of making a PPT, but again, I wasn't sure as to how we are supposed to present. That's why I asked
These are
before
the choices.
presenting.
No. These are the choices. No teachers are now going to tell you when you go to a class how to prepare
Yes,
and present
ma'am.
your class. These are the decisions you have to take yourselves.
Yes, ma'am.
Then also both of you should also think in terms of the length of presentations.
Hmm.
What is the standard span for attention?
15 to 20 minutes.
So if you take thrice that time, what will happen to the audience? So there are certainly, no, there are two things. One is the certainly substantively have covered the whole article. It's a good presentation. I certainly think that one has to keep also track of the audience, because when we are
Jatin,
presenting something, we're not doing it for ourselves. We are doing it for the others. So we need to get a sense of what the others are saying, or understanding, not understanding. And of course, with these names available, we do not know whether people are listening. They are kind of just waiting for you to stop, us to stop in that sense. So it's just, and unless you build up certain kind of situations where you can get some feedback. So I'm just reminding you your andragogy course, nothing more than that. So coming back to the article, anybody else who has a comment to make on the substance of the article, or what your thoughts were when you read the article? Do you find anything which connects that article to what you are doing in your life in terms of your PhD work? Whether any of the schools or any of the developments or any of the arguments, examples have any connection with the work you're doing, or you can find any connection with your work?
I have specifically come to, I wouldn't say come to terms. I mean, I have been made familiar with some of the very key concepts of gender and sex that I believe will help in my thesis that I am looking at, as I have already talked about. I am looking at about how the female participation in the military is is going to whether it's going to be a very advantageous for our nation, or or it can go in some other direction. So I have gained some insights in a sense that uh, uh, that wall of separation between the sex and gender, these two terms, which Moira Gatens also talks about, and in this essay Haywood also talks about it, that uh, there is some reflections of gender on the terms, on the biological term sex also. I mean, there is a lot of things which reflects on the term sex, and how there can be a different, because for me there was this um this belief that these two terms are very isolated and very separated. So when I think of now this statement that sex can also be gendered, my understanding of female participation in the our armed forces, it has changed a little bit. It has given me a different kind of insight. So these two essays have really helped me in making up that, or deviating from my previous understanding of these two concepts, gender and sex.
Yeah, I want you to, want all of us to focus a lot more today on Haywood's. Haywood basically has collected, he's giving us in a compact manner all the schools and thoughts, etc. So from that perspective, when you look at the liberal feminist, you look at the radical, you look at the social Marxist feminist, and you look the intersectionality of the debates today. The question I'm asking you is that when suppose Jatin's work, you are looking at women in the army. So you're looking at them from the perspective of the liberal school of feminists, saying that, okay, women should have the similar activities, similar responsibilities, similar challenges as men. So that's what, because of whatever the men are doing, women should be allowed to do. So that's the liberal feminist perspective into the public sphere participation on equality. If we say it is a radical feminism, then we are talking about that no, the family setup has to first change. So therefore, rules like Muthamma, which say that if you are in the armed forces, no, well, if you have to draw parallel. So if you're in the armed forces, you must not marry, you must do certain things. You must not have family responsibilities. So because somewhere your family is equally important, and in the army, you have to be having non-family stations, and therefore, no, all those kinds of limitations were thought of earlier. So that will be challenging, that will be challenged by the perspective of the radical feminism, that to what extent, in what manners, the relationship between the individual and the family has to change before they can participate equally. And then also, then we are looking at the socialist feminist perspective, and we're saying that the whole issue of sexual harassment in the workforce, in the workplaces, including the army, whether that will be a major challenge in, integrating women into the all spheres, etc. And this is all across the country, in international world, which are permitted women to be in the armed forces. So what are the angles that you will be looking at? And that's where I think Haywood becomes relevant. That he has kind of said, first he has cut out the schools, and then he talks about the basic themes which are common to all schools. And Anil has talked about that when he talks about the private public dichotomy, patriarchy, sex and gender inequality and difference. So these are the 4 common themes in all the on all the schools. So when you are looking at women's integration in the army, what will be the challenges, what will be the possible solutions from these perspectives, that how far the patriarchal notions of army. And also, I think in your case, certainly you're going to have to go through a lot of changes in your thinking, because remember, who were the warriors in wars? What was the concept of war? Today is a bit different with COVID around us. The war has changed its nature itself. So till now, we will not be calling it a war in the same traditional sense. But we are using that word day in and day out, that we are fighting a war. And the warriors in this fight are not the soldiers as we have understood them technically earlier. So yours is going to be completely, you will have to rethink the whole concept there. And I said in that angle, I'm asking each one of us to reflect that whether these thoughts, the 4 running themes in all the schools of feminism and all the different schools of feminism, whether you are going to analyze or reflect on the laws that you're dealing with from any of those perspectives. Because that's the primary job of these articles, so analyzing, keeping Haywood in mind, and talking about Mahabharata is a one way. So that's kind of different altogether, but our primary purpose is to apply the theory we're reading to the work we are doing. And this may be a film, this may be an epic, this may be a law. So what is the law reflecting? Is it reflecting the approach of legal feminism, the liberal feminism and the sameness approach? Is it talking about difference? Is it talking about private-public dichotomy? What is the law talking about? I think that's where this whole theory becomes relevant. So Anil has spent a considerable time. Anil, what are the lessons that you've got for your PhD work from this article? Have you got any thoughts which will be helpful to you to do your PhD analysis? Anil, are you there? Anybody else? Shikha, Sonam, Vashne, Sneh, Manya, Kamal, Hani, anyone who has got an idea that any of these concepts, any of these schools or the themes of feminism are of any use to you in your PhD work?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. I got a point in my mind regarding my PhD thesis that as far as the liberal feminism is concerned, that could be related to my topic, as FGM is a practice which is stringently founded in many countries abroad, even mainly in abroad. So if the liberal feminism approach is being followed in those countries, then definitely they will be thinking that how harmful this practice is and how khatna is being done on women, and it is taking their lives for no reason. So the pragmatic approach that could be sorted out after reading this article, I found that.
Hmm. Same.
Ma'am, my topic is regarding environmental law. So I kind of uh, could not connect anything with feminist theory and environment. Only the jurisprudential part I could connect, where we connect nature and environment with with a female, and not as a female giving earth, mother earth, and all that. But actually didn't think on those terms that environmental law, plastic waste actually it is, and how feminist theory can be linked to the plastic waste usage.
Mm-hmm.
That I couldn't correlate till now.
Think, because
I definitely.
there's no point. No, this knowledge is not in pockets that it will be available in this course, useful in that course. Are women affected by the Environment Declaration?
Ma'am, definitely they are everybody, but then it's a kind of a wholesome thing. Definitely, I'll think about it
No,
more
because
so in a.
I think that's what my whole point is, that we all need to connect that what we are learning. But that's when in my class also we were saying that we are doing the constitutional fundamentals of law. We're again saying relate back. So whether it is feminist jurisprudence or constitution or whatever, you have to make connections. That when we have all these perspectives about patriarchy, we have this perspective about private public and dichotomy, we have the different approach. So how is it going to be of any use in my analysis of the law that I am looking at?
Ma'am, I'll definitely.
All laws,
that regard.
when we're talking about environment degradation, we're talking about that it affects all the human race, the whole human race. So, but then human race doesn't live in the same sphere. The female live in a private sphere, the men live in the public sphere. And the female, when they come to the public sphere, they are still having a private sphere limitation. So whether the law which imposes same responsibilities, same obligations, same rights, or same duties in all the laws, to what extent they're going to impact women differently? The sameness approach, how it is going to impact women differently? And what kind of differences will be there for whatever the law says?
True,
And
ma'am.
especially when you have this private-public division of labor, that men will earn and the women will do household work. You impose great fines, you impose great punishments. How is that going to impact the women who are not out there violating the laws? That's something to think about. We only always look at the actor, but who are the actors? If the actors in terms of violators are going to be men, and you keep on sending them to prisons for long terms, what happened to their women and children?
That's a very interesting point, ma'am. Actually, it is, because it does have provision for punishment and penal provisions, and also imprisonment.
We are all going penal now every day. For everything penal, more punishments, more severe, longer, higher fines. So if you put 50 lakhs of fine on the husband or the man, whoever that is, and usually we are again stuck because of the patriarchal structures of our society and families and institutions, that it is the men who are doing all this economics, whether of paying fines or collecting fines, and then they're taking decisions of how to use those fines. Women are not there in the decision-making processes or for any one of these, but it impacts the women.
True, ma'am.
So certainly there will be angles. You start looking at who are the people affected by my action. So there would be people who are directly affected because they are in the public sphere, but there are always people linked with them who are in the private spheres. How are their life going to impact, and what has been their contribution, what has been their fault? So we keep on imposing the responsibility on the family for the wrongful act done by their members. But who are these family members who are being held responsible? And who are the ones who are the actors violating the laws? If we do an analysis of that, we will find a different insight. So if you, yes, Sneh.
Sorry, ma'am. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, ma'am.
So I'm just saying, if you start thinking on those lines for the law's operations, you will find angles, and there's no all these studies relevant for your analysis.
Ma'am, definitely it's given me a new perspective. In fact, I'm thinking of including this part in my analysis now. The whole impact on family and impact on female with the whole laws. So
Yeah, because when it's a family, family is again a very, very structured, status-oriented members there. Every single member of the family is not similarly situated to take the impact. And they may not be also the similarly situated actors in causing the impact. So certainly, who are the ones who are flying around? So we're talking about carbon index, carbon footprints. Who are those who are putting, who are putting the carbon footprints much more than those who are not? So who are the travelers? Who are the people who are doing active things for which adds to the pollution, or whatever we are talking about? So okay, Anil said he had found a new angle. So what is it, Anil, that you have found?
Ma'am, the whole patriarchy system in the judicial process itself.
Mm-hmm.
We only look after the coded criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
But from the perspective of a woman,
Mm-hmm.
there are offenses which are not defined yet.
Mm-hmm.
But from the perspective of women, she is getting hurt, and there is no redressal for that.
No, certainly criminology has to rethink that what are the actions which have been made punishable and what are the actions which have not been made punishable. Crime is not created by God. The crime is created by human beings. We define what activity is crime, what activity is not crime. And having done that, no, we have been asking this question generally also, that even till today, your neighbor can die of starvation and you might be having sufficient means to give them that family. Or we had this other example, it was a moral duty to save the drowning man. It is only a moral obligation to stop and help the accident victims. These are not seen as activities falling under 304, which says, 304thly, doing an act not imminently dangerous, but certainly to 9thirdly, with the knowledge that it is likely to cause death. If I do not take care of this person, is likely to die. One could have imposed culpable homicide liability on neighbors, but we haven't done that. So these are the decisions we have made. This is not that what is moral obligation and what is legal obligation. Legal obligations are created by us, but in which circumstances we have converted a moral obligation to a legal obligation, and which we have left out. Certainly the manner in which we define what is crime itself is very, very gendered, very, very class situated. It's very, or the marginalized, the concerns of the marginalized are not seen as the concerns of society. So who is that society for whom we are writing or we are making the laws? So I think there is a possibility of doing that analysis from any of these readings. You do take up Dalit literature and you'll find a similar kind of challenges, that whose norms are being practiced. When you look at international law, for example, we've also been asking that the practices of nurturing children in the South Asia are not seen as international. The European practices of children have been universalized as universal. So again, it's always the powerful which lays down as to what is desirable. And that powerful can take any shape. It can take the North, it can take the high caste, it can take the men, it can take any, the powerful education. So today today's newspaper is talking about, suddenly we have realized the importance of the manual labor. When they're wanting to go home and you want to start your factories and establishments, the people are going back home. They're saying we will eat less in our villages, but we don't want to come and face the cities. Now city has suddenly realized the importance of their being. So till now they are the least paid. So the academics and the thinkers, people who are using mind power were given more power in terms of economic rewards for their work. But today we are realizing the importance of the manual labor. So certainly, there's always a possibility of looking at it from a different perspective. but we are so ingrained and focused on the powerful way of thinking, and thinking of the situation from the position of power, that we do not think of the position of the disadvantage in that particular situation. So I think that's
Yes,
why I
ma'am.
think these readings may be useful for you to develop that critical thinking, that look at from the perspective of this particular group of deprived section of women are 50%, and in that sense, they are not the most deprived in all senses, but women with those additional deprivation situations can maybe do become most vulnerable in many situations. Certainly, the gender studies would give you that handle to be able to appreciate the position of that particular group from whose perspective you want to examine. In which cases the marginalized sections are beneficiaries, in which they are the ones who are actually going to pay the cost we want. So all that needs to be really looked into.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay, any other thoughts you have?
Ma'am, just one.
Manil?
Yes, ma'am, just one. Ma'am, it's again the male who are sitting in the parliament who are having the power to recognize the offenses and incorporate in the statute book. So they have the power to whether to suppress women again all over.
Anil, my position has been very clear that it does not matter whether it is the men sitting there or women sitting there. Because when you yourself made the presentation during Thatcher's regime, there was a whole revival of family responsibility and role. So Thatcher was a
Yes, ma'am.
woman, so it doesn't matter whether it's a man sitting there or a woman sitting there, or a rich man sitting there or the upper caste sitting there. More important is whether this person who's sitting there, in whose interest is that person speaking, from whose perspective is that person speaking. Most of the time, we would want to think of life from my life experience. That's normal and usual. But if you want to be a leader, you need to understand the life experiences of people other than you. The lives you have not lived, but you can hear them speak and hear and experience what they're going through, and then think of what is the best way to make that flow. So I've always said no, that
Yes,
in
ma'am.
women commissions, a woman should be the head. But if the woman mindset wise is patriarchal, she is a patriarch, then what is the whole point? You put a child, somebody who has been an educationist into the reform, but he or she has been talking of very traditional values and nothing progressive about it. So it is not merely your sex; it is your gender. It is your perspective of the gender, your perspective of the other that will determine what kind of laws will come. So certainly, the lots of benefits, lots of new changes have come with the same men sitting in the parliament. Not that
Yes, ma'am.
any time the law has come because there were female in the parliamentarians there. Lots of laws for women have come, even though they were all male parliamentarians. So I don't think that that's the only category. That's an important category to record, because normally people will experience the world as they have experienced it themselves. They will conceive of the world as they have experienced it themselves. But if there is sufficient voices raised of those others who are not sitting there, but people sitting there can hear them, they have an ear, they have an empathy, then anybody can make a different law. And I think as researchers, that's our responsibility, to make those voices heard by our researchers, by our work. Those who cannot get elected to represent what they are feeling, how are they experiencing the law, which are made for their welfare, for their interests. I
Yes,
think that's an important role researchers have, to question what is happening right and what is not happening, not to identify what is happening right and what needs to change. So if we don't do that, and we kind of keep on repeating ourselves, oh, law needs to be changed, but for why the law needs to be changed, how it needs to be changed, what direction, who will benefit, who will be the targets of change, how will we ensure? So all that, when we did a much more systematic analysis of the laws and critical understanding of how the world is experiencing the laws which have been made. Apparently, all laws are made for the benefit of people. Even when we punish them, we also get, this man is being punished because the other will be secure and they'll be safe. We are punishing him or her because they have done the wrong. So we have justifications for all laws, and the ultimate justification that is for the benefit of the society, humanity, the whole world, environment, everything, whole universe. So that's the given of the law. But then with that intention, when we make the law, is it really achieving its purpose? Or it is creating another set of new problems? I think that's what we really need to think about.
Yes, so ma'am, I found this in the case mat that it's a reading of 2004. So ma'am, this reading does not talk about the third wave of feminism.
Third wave?
And
there's no
yes,
third, is there a third wave of, in that sense, human rights? We keep on saying the environmental conversation is third wave for human rights. But that's a completely different wave altogether, that focused on a different thing. It's not focused on the same way the first two waves of human rights were. So the third phase, I would say a lot more rather than the third wave, because in the third phase, it's become very fragmented. You're starting talking about intersectionality, talking about the Black women, the Dalit women, the women within women's rights as well. Because at some stage, some people started believing that now women have achieved equality. But we do know that it's far from the truth. If they're still, and especially in the South Asia, and especially in India, and especially in the educated class in India, women are not desirable unit at all. Next generation is the very big indicator. Women are not desirable in this country by the educated upper class, educated middle class people, middle upper whoever. They're not the ones who are desirable. So we didn't need a PCP-NDT legislation if there was no issue about women being equal. The very fact that we have this legislation speaks volumes.
Yes.
So we
also there are some feminists who are saying that we are currently living in a fourth wave of feminism, which this fourth wave is now connected with the technology, and #MeToo movement is one of the aspects of this fourth wave feminism.
Personally speaking, I really don't worry about what the titles and the designations are: first wave, second wave, third wave, fourth wave, fifth wave, whatever number. I'm not good at counting in any case. I'm more interested in saying, where are we today?
Yes,
what is it that we are doing today? And what is it that needs to change today? Because quibbling about whether to call it third wave, fourth wave, or not to any wave at all is not very relevant as far as my thinking goes. I may be wrong, but I don't worry about that.
Ma'am, but it helps us in conceptualizing the whole or historicizing the whole feminist movement. I believe it becomes a little helpful.
Yeah, but when the time is a continuous concept, can you put a break saying, okay, overnight this changed? When did it start?
Absolutely.
When it stopped? So, okay, we kind of do some division. So, this is day and night, and today is 7th, and tomorrow is 8th, and that's okay. But to say that my thinking changed overnight, from yesterday I was a minor, today I become a major. So these are things done for certain purposes. But for me to regulate my life because of that, because today I become 63 or 55 or 29 or 30. I become old because I'm 35. I don't.
Okay.
I would not spend so much energy on that aspect.
All right.
But want to know that what are the challenges faced by women in the 21st century, and therefore certainly technology and abuse on the because of the technology is a new phase which has opened. But that way everything was an addition at some or the other point. The moment the transport were built, the day the wheel was discovered, something new had happened. So every stage will have some other aspects.
Yes.